ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor for me to participate at this event and to be able to share my views based on my country's experience. The geopolitical turbulence over the past quarter century has taught us that Moldova can become a real functional state only within the European Union. Trying to be pro-European and pro-Russian at the same time courts disaster. Russia today is replaying its 19th century geopolitical tug of war in the region. It has all the ingredients. A relentless fight over spheres of influence, no matter the human costs, buffer zones, deterrence through conventional and nuclear forces, incentives and punishments for loyalties and disobedience. Russia is seeking to carve out a security perimeter around itself and come to an accommodation with the West, dividing these spheres of influence. Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova are key parts of this struggle. Russia perceives any attempts by these states to pursue their own destiny, to become functional European democracies, as an exit from its sphere of influence, and it punishes any of such efforts with economic blockades or through retaliatory measures. If Russia feels that it might lose control, it will go to war, as it was mentioned here already. And in line with this logic, Russia managed to create strategic footprints, first in the Transnistrian region in Moldova, in South Ossetia and Abkhazia in Georgia, and now in Donbass in Ukraine. This serves to prevent post-Soviet states from pursuing independent national agendas. But in order to wage this geopolitical tug of war, Russia needs preconditions. Russia can more easier pursue its geopolitical objectives in weak and badly divided states. And to my regret, throughout Moldova's independent history, the country's successive governments have themselves chosen to play along with Russia's geopolitical game, and they are much to be blamed for Moldova's today's fragility as Russia is. Instead of charting a clear way forward and consolidating domestic forces around this goal, most of the governments in Moldova exploited the geopolitical competition in the region to pursue their narrow political agenda, playing on the fears and nostalgic feelings of the Moldovans. Moldova has always tried to have a foot in both camps, playing on the contradictions between the West and Russia, and has ultimately itself suffered the consequences of this irresponsible policy. Let's take my country today. It has a corrupt government which is hated by the people. The quality of Moldova's institutions are the worst in the region because they are fully controlled by several individuals who use them for their own purposes. And these people don't respect any rules or they change them on the go, with a parliamentary majority in which most of the members of the parliament have been simply bought by the corrupt oligarchs. The government is in poor shape and has no external and internal support. And in this situation, to keep power, they just try to exploit the geopolitical situation. For instance, in the presidential elections last year, the so-called pro-European government, which is in power now, didn't try to consolidate the pro-European forces in Moldova. Quite the opposite. They handed the presidency over to a pro-Russian person, Igor Dodon, who now takes 60% of his instructions from the corrupt Moldovan government and the other 40% of the instructions from the Kremlin. And together, these two political forces are spreading now hate and fear in the society, trying to keep it divided. This government says that it wants Moldova to become a member of the European Union. It's a lie. This is not what it wants. This government doesn't want to have the rule of law. It doesn't want to have independent prosecutors and courts. It doesn't want to have meaningful separation of power and respect for individuals' rights. All of this would mean that they would lose power. What they really want is to have Moldova in a gray area, a buffer zone between Russia and the West. In this kind of Moldova, they can endlessly change the rules, capture government institutions to extract illegal rents, and stifle any opposition voices. That's their ideal of the country, a territory where they will be setting all the rules and change them as it suits their own purposes. The Baltic countries were wise enough to choose and firmly follow the right road. And I look around with respect at the Lithuanian leaders who had the vision and leadership to unite their domestic constituencies and to pursue a single agenda, the European and Euro-Atlantic future for their country, and relentlessly pursued this agenda despite all odds. This is the recipe for success for the rest of the countries which are struggling today in the region. Only through the unity of purpose, a common vision, can a country withstand Russia's geopolitical offensive. But if politicians deliberately pull the country into two opposite directions and alternate between Russia and the West only to stay in power, as they are doing now in Moldova, this policy leads to disaster. Russia can turn around weak states, especially those who willingly lend themselves to these games. Those countries who do implement responsible policies, those governments which do believe in the European values, in the Western values, and they pursue these values, with those countries, it's going to be more difficult for Russia to deal. Yes, Russia is not going to like it, but they will have to accept this reality. So this is what we try to call today. We call for the unity of the authentic pro-Western, pro-democratic forces, regardless whether this is civil society, opposition parties, or in the lucky countries, governments, because only with the unity of such forces we can withstand and oppose the attempts of the totalitarian regimes, of the Kremlin regime, to steal our freedom and to steal our future. Thank you.